Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today in a follow-up to another very successful turfgrass research field day at the Hampton Roads HRAREC in Virginia Beach, which was just a few weeks ago. We've asked Dr. Jeff Derr and Mr. Adam Nichols to join us to talk about some of that work in today's webinar. So, Dr. Derr, Adam, I'm going to turn things over to you.
All right, good morning. Thank you for joining us. We'd like to give you kind of an update on some of the turf research we're doing here at the research station. This will be similar to the tour that we gave back in June for our field day. We'll touch upon some of the trials that covered in the field day. One thing I would like to thank the Turfgrass Foundation, the Virginia Turfgrass Council for their support. We couldn't do the types of turfgrass research here without their financial support, also just the general support of the industry behind what we do here at the station. So we definitely appreciate all the support we have from industry, from the foundation, from the council, from all of you across the state. I'm going to have Adam and I will be sharing this, so we'll be jumping back and forth between the two of us. And I was going to have Adam start out with some work we're cooperating with Dr. Shawn Askew on.
So this was a work that came out from a question that is often asked of warm season grasses. The question being, can I spray my warm season grasses when they're dormant with things like glyphosate, most commonly known as Roundup, or glufosinate, which is most commonly known as Tenacity? And if I can spray them, when is it going to actually be safe to spray them? So we were looking at zoysia grass at our station here, and we wanted to spray them with Roundup at 16 fluid ounces per acre and Finale at 6 quarts per acre. Now, as far as timing goes, timing is always a difficult question when you're dealing with warm season grasses. Usually people want to go by the calendar. However, our weather doesn't always exactly follow the dates on the calendar. So we've come up with this growing degree day model in which you count how many growing degree days you've accumulated past a certain date. For this particular study, we were using 200, 400, 600, and 800 growing degree days. We're using a base temperature of 32 to determine those growing degree days. So after 200 growing degree days, that could be over 2 weeks, and it could be 3 to 4 weeks maybe before you get to the next one. So the good thing about growing degree days is it's not year dependent. It is actually weather dependent. And you're able to kind of, tell year to year to year what days I can actually spray, or when have I passed the day that it would be too late to spray. With our study, we found that it didn't matter which product you use. We did not see any injury to the zoysia grass at 200 growing degree days. We did see faster injury to the weeds within our plots, but with that fast burn down, you actually did see some regrowth in the Finale plots. Whereas the Roundup, while it did not act as fast, it was a little bit more complete. Once you hit the 600 and 800 growing degree days, those with both Roundup and Finale, we were seeing unacceptable injury to the zoysia grass. But that was, at those times, we were actually seeing about 10 to 15% green up of our zoysia. So what this actually looks like on the left here, you can actually see this is what our Roundup plot looked like 200 growing, or what it looks like now after 200 growing degree day, or when we sprayed at 200 growing degree days. You have a clean plot, you have your zoysia looking very clean and green and healthy. Whereas when we look at the finale plots and the Roundup plots, you see actually quite a bit of weeds growing in there. You see some crabgrass, you see some other broadleaves. While the two product weeds out, they also were injuring the zoysia to a point that it allowed these other weeds to grow back in faster than the zoysia could recover. So overall, you want to, if you're going to spray in the wintertime, you want to make sure you actually get it done before you get to that 600 growing degree day
mark. Next, we'll talk about some work we're doing with some experimental broadleaf herbicides. Basically, these three products that we have listed, Game On, Relzar, and Switchblade, are based on a new post-emergence broadleaf herbicide for turf, and you may see it listed under the name Arylex or haloxyphene methyl. Each of these three products have haloxyphene methyl. Game On is a combination with fluroxapyr and a low volatile formulation of 2,4-D choline. Relzar is haloxyphene methyl plus flurancelam, and Switchblade is haloxyphene methyl plus fluroxapyr and dicamba. One trial that we showed, all three of these treatments did well, very effective on ground ivy, less so on wild violets. Wild violets is one of our toughest to control broadleaf weeds. We only did one application in this study. We need to do more work on improving the effectiveness on that particular species. Give you a little more background on the first product, Game On. Again, you see it's haloxyphene methyl, 0.02 pounds per gallon. We're going out at 3 to 4 pints, so a maximum of 0.02 pounds per acre. So very low use post-emergence broadleaf herbicide. And again, this combination has 0.39 pounds per gallon of fluroxapyr and 2.86 pounds per gallon of 2,4-D in a low volatile form. You can see the intended use would be on a wide range of cool season turf grasses. May have to be a little bit more careful on Bermuda grass, the warm season grasses due to the fluroxapyr. But we did not see any injury. We treated the bluegrass site, hybrid bluegrass, and also we treated a Bermuda grass site, and we're really not seeing injury on that species. You can see other cool season turf grasses, bentgrass, there's bluegrasses, tall and fine fescue, and ryegrass. So expected to be pretty wide labeling on a number of turfgrass species. Relzar is two products in this combination, haloxyphene methyl and flurancelam. You can see both at equal and very low use rates. At the rates we're looking at, 0.01 pounds per acre with both of these. This one for use on both and warm season grasses. You see some additional warm season grasses, St. Augustine, zoysia, centipede, etc., as well as cool season turf grasses. And then Switchblade is a combination of haloxyphene with fluroxapyr. You see a little lower rate than was in Game On, and instead of 2,4-D that's in Game On, but a quarter of a pound per gallon. The rates we're looking at, it's about 1/8 of a pound dicamba per acre. Again, pretty wide labeling expected on both warm and cool season grasses. We'll come back and talk about some of the results on some other broadleaf species.
So we're going to continue talking about rough stalk bluegrass. This has been an issue in tall fescue for the past couple of years that has generated a lot of questions. And the past 2 years, we've done quite a bit of work and, in tall fescue, especially with spring applications, where we were seeing really, really good control of rough stalk bluegrass, or POA triv, as it's often called, with things like combinations of Exonerate and Pilex, Exonerate and Tenacity, or Exonerate and Progress. The issue that we were seeing mostly, though, was that Exonerate and Pilex and Exonerate and Progress, while we had really good control with these spring applications, we're also seeing quite a bit of injury to the tall fescue itself, and at times very unacceptable injury. So question came to us, well, what if we were to spray these in the wintertime when the tall fescue would have a lot more time to recover from it? Would we still see this injury, and would we be able to increase the control that we were seeing? Overall, we took a look at this. We stayed at the rates that we had used in the past, which were the 5.6 fluid ounces of Exonerate using the 4SC product, and then 1.5 fluid ounces per acre of the Pylex, 8 fluid ounces of Tenacity per acre, and then using 1.5 pounds of the Turfgrasss per acre. We then also halved all of these rates to see if the injury would stay the same and not lose the control. What we actually did see, though, is that in the winter treatments, we saw a lot of injury with the higher rates, or the higher rates, the 5.6 plus the combinations, especially from the Exonerate plus Turfgrasss. But we get better control in these rates than the halved rates. But again, the injury that we are seeing at times was so bad that we don't think that it would actually be useful for anybody to use. As you can see here from our previous work, the amount of POA-TRIV control we were able to get at 56 days after our treatments. With Exonerate and Pylex and the Exonerate and Turfgrasss, we were almost at 100% control, and then at about 85% control with the Exonerate and Tenacity. However, Pylex and the Turfgrasss combinations were causing much more injury than we would think would be acceptable. The winter applications, on the other hand, were keeping the same amount of control with the Tenacity, but you did see increased injury. And the same happened with the Exonerate and Turfgrasss. You saw an increase in injury from those spring applications. The Exonerate and Pylex, we didn't have the same kind of injury, but at the same time, we did not have the same kind of control. This overall means we've got a little bit more work to do on POA-TRIV within tall fescue to find both the timing and the rates that are both acceptable for control, as well as acceptable injury to have on tall fescue.
So one of the weeds that we have quite a bit of, and especially in this part of the state, is Virginia buttonweed. It's a perennial that creeping perennial spreads vegetatively, but it also spreads readily by seed. So I think that's part of a long-term control. We need to manage it by controlling existing plants and controlling it coming back from seed. We don't always see this, but often it'll have a yellow mottled color. I think it's a virus that will infect the plant, and it'll stand out, giving a bright yellow appearance to the leaves. Doesn't seem to slow down that plant. And one thing that we've seen over the years working with Virginia buttonweed is we can knock down the existing foliage of the plants, but getting long-term control is difficult. We'll often see regrowth coming back 3-4 weeks later, coming back from the stems that aren't completely controlled. There are various post-emergence broadleaf herbicides. I mentioned the 3 new experimental formulations that we're testing: Game On, Relzar, and Switchblade. This is some data from this year's trials. One thing that we've been doing lately is growing these weeds in pots that we'll treat so we can easily take shoot weights, as well as also taking ratings on control in the field in established Bermuda grass turf. So the shoot weights, again, from pots, this is only 16 days after the initial treatment. And, we can see that we've reduced to some extent the shoot weights. This study is still ongoing, so we're going to be coming back and taking a second round of shoot weights on those pots, and I think we'll see a little better separation. One thing that we were told was that Relzar alone was going to be a little weak on Virginia buttonweed. And you can see the shoot weights are a little higher with that. We were told to try adding Vista to it. Vista is straight fluroxapyr. You can see when we added fluroxapyr to Relzar, we did reduce the amount of shoot weights. So that's in the first data column. Second column is from the field trial. You can see we're seeing relatively good control with game on. Again, low control with Relzar alone, improved control when we add Vista to Relzar. Not seeing very good control with Switchblade, better control with Speed Zone, Avenue South, and Celsius and Metsulfuron or MSM, giving us a fair to good control. Now, what you see there, 26 days after the first application, is nothing is giving us 100% control. And that's what we've seen in previous trials where we do need to come back, say 3 or 4 weeks later, and do repeat treatments if our goal is to eradicate that plant. We've never really seen 100% control with one application of the broadleaf herbicides that we've tested. So a tough to control weed, but we are seeing a little bit of separation on some of these newer products and their effectiveness on a very important broadleaf weed for us. Jumping now to another trial that we did last year, and we repeated this with some different treatments. We've gotten questions on how to control both Mondo grass and the liriope that they crept into a turf area from an ornamental bed. It's Mondo and liriope are not in the grass family. They're monocots, but they're in a separate plant family. Taxonomically, they've moved Mondo grass. It used to be in a lily family. That's what I used to talk about, these plants being in that family. They moved Mondo into another plant family, a plant that has asparagus in it. So anyhow, these ground carvers can invade turf areas, and we get questions, how do we control it? And they're actually very difficult to control, have a pretty good tolerance to glyphosate or Roundup. We repeated some of the treatments that we did last year, and we added Diquat, which is commonly sold as reward, and we talked about glufosinate or finale already. So 2 herbicides, after 2 applications, gave us very significant injury to Mondo grass, did not completely control them. We need to make additional applications. But most of the other herbicides that we have tested have not controlled Mondo grass. So we don't have, at this point, a really good selective control. We're not sure why. One possible control, especially in Bermuda grass, was metsulfuron. We had fairly good results with metsulfuron last year. We're not seeing as good a control this year. We're not quite sure why. Again, this study is ongoing, and maybe with repeat applications, we would pick up a little better control of Mondo grass with metsulfuron. But besides that, we really haven't found effective, safe treatments for controlling Mondo, and we figured this data would apply to liriope as well, how to control these in an established turf situation.
Jeff, if I can ask you a quick question with that one, and this is the reverse, but this kind of your area, the standard grass control now in Mondo, what would be the chemistry that's used there? Because that has been the norm, and I get that one from time to time.
Well, in terms of controlling things like crabgrass or wild-type Bermuda grass that creeps into, say, a Mondo bed, segment, which is sethoxidin is the active ingredient, would be a good choice. We're not going to injure Mondo or liriope with segment, so we go right over the top when those grasses are actively growing and remove them selectively. So we can take grasses out of Mondo with a grass herbicide, and again, segment would be my choice there. Taking Mondo out of turf is an entirely different situation.
Different ballgame. Okay, thank you.
So often it's the case that when it comes to seeding of tall fescue, our recommendation has always been you want to seed your tall fescue as a cool season grass in the fall. You want to give that grass the longest amount of time to mature before it hits the summertime, especially in the Hampton Roads area where it's often very hot and very humid. But this is not always the case where either the weather or damage to the turf comes along where you actually have to do some kind of seeding in the spring. concerns about this often become with crabgrass control, because at this time of the year is when you want to put down your pre-emergent herbicides. You can't do that if you're going to actually be seeding in the spring. And then disease management. Tall fescue is very susceptible to Rhizoctonia, and the younger the tall fescue is, the more susceptible it is. And you want to get this stuff established before the onset of the hot, dry weather that is inevitable to happen in this area. So we wanted to evaluate different herbicide treatments along with a fungicide program on tall fescue to see if we could actually establish a good stand of tall fescue in the springtime. One of the very good products that you can actually spray over top of tall fescue is Tenacity, which is mesotrione, going out at a quarter pound of AI per acre, followed by another quarter pound of AI per acre about 6 weeks later. Doing that same regimen where we start off at seeding time with the Tenacity, followed by half a pound of Dimension per acre to kind of increase that crabgrass control. This Tenacity at quarter pound per acre, it'll give you probably about 4, maybe 6 weeks of pre-emergent control for crabgrass, but it is definitely not going to give you season-long control that you might be able to get with Dimension. So you can start off with Tenacity, get the tall fescue up and going, and once it's up to a certain point, then we can start to use something like Dimension to get that crabgrass away for the rest of the season. That would be just as good. Another one of our treatments, Scott's starter fertilizer plus weed control. The weed control component that they've added to this starter fertilizer is mesotrione, but at the rate that they tell you to use, it's only going to put out 0.15 pounds AI per acre. So you're going out at a lower rate than you would of Tenacity. And so we used this 2 times like we did Tenacity. So we're putting out 0.15 followed by 0.15. And then did this where we started off with the Scott starter and followed it with Dimension as well to see if that we could continue to get that crabgrass control for season long. And finally, to cover the component of the disease, we had our plots split. We're spraying half of our plots with Heritage, which is azoxystrobin, one of the best Rhizoctonia materials on the market. Want to give it that protection with and without to see how well the tall fescue would manage. The Scott starter food plus weed control I kind of just went over. It's a granular fertilizer plus mesotrione. It's a 21-22-4 fertilizer, so it's got that high phosphorus content, which you would want as you're starting off your turfgrass from seed. And then at the rate that they suggest, again, you're going to be putting out 0.15 pounds of mesotrione per acre. What we found out, 2 applications of Tenacity gave greater weed control than any of our other treatments. The Tenacity or the Heritage to that treatment was probably one of our best treatments. The primary weed that we initially saw was yellow nutsedge, and Tenacity actually does excellent against yellow nutsedge. And so the 2 applications kind of cleared that up, allowed that tall fescue to establish, get really healthy, and be able to actually outcompete a lot of the weeds. The 2 applications of Tenacity was better than the Scott's starter with fertilizer. And our thoughts on that were that the better coverage that you're able to get with the spray plus the higher rate. Our 2 rates of Tenacity were giving us half a pound of the mesotrione versus the 0.3 pounds. So you're only getting about 60% of your mesotrione down on the ground when you're using the Scott starter with weed control.
Adam, when was the heritage application made in terms of timing for the seeding?
The heritage application started 6 weeks after seeding. I started those, and there were multiple applications. I started them at the beginning of June and did them on a monthly basis. I went June 1st, July 1st, and August 1st. So at a rate that should cover 28 to 30 days. So that, you know, here, that would cover us for the most part of our brown patch season. So, again, Tenacity plus Heritage was our most successful program. You can see in these pictures here what our plots were actually looking like. These pictures were taken in September. So this is at the end of our season after we have gone through our entire summer. You can see our untreated check. While you do have some tall fescue in there, you're actually dealing mostly with crabgrass. You've got some clover in there, probably some Virginia buttonweed. But this, if you had this, had started with this, come fall time, this is almost a situation where you want to blow it up and start all over again. Whereas the Tenacity, Tenacity and Heritage, we actually have very, very clean plots. You have very little weed coverage in there, just a few breakthroughs in crabgrass, which isn't surprising, considering Tenacity isn't going to work full season, but it allowed the tall fescue to establish enough that it has started to compete against it. Whereas in our Scott starter, again, you have better weed control than what you're seeing in your untreated check, but using that much lower rate is going to give you the coverage and the long term that the two Tenacity applications were going to give you. And then what the Heritage application was actually able to give us, you could see here, having Heritage, our tall fescue is much stronger, and you only see a little bit of breakthrough. Whereas when you get the, you do not have the Heritage, you're going to get brown patch in that tall fescue. When you have the brown patch, it's going to take it down, and it's going to allow for weeds to invade into that area a lot more readily, as the tall fescue can no longer compete against the summer annuals such as crabgrass and buttonweed. So continuing on with this spring seeding, we did get the question, well, what happens if I get into a situation where I've already put down my pre-emergent herbicide, such as Barricade, and then I have a large loss in my stand, either from you know, an accident happening on the turf or a misapplication of herbicides? What do I do then? So we started to look at, well, what kind of treatments would we need? And we were comparing activated charcoal, which is something that is going to deactivate emergent herbicide, versus a new product on the market, Miramichi Green compost. This is a compost plus a biochar. It's a very high in carbon stable soil amendment. We figure would be able to also tie up the Barricade along, so that as you actually seeded your tall fescue, you're not going to lose that tall fescue to the Barricade, which would have done it otherwise. We compared incorporating the activated charcoal and the Miramichi Green with tilling those products in, versus surface applying it just right over top of an area, and then also surface applying it after you've done core aeration, which the core aeration would actually break up that Barricade layer and then allow the those products to get further down into the soil where that barricade actually is. This is what Miramichi green looks like. Again, it's a high organic form of carbon. You've got the biochar and then compost. What we determined was that applications of the activated charcoal or the Miramichi green, it really was not that much of a difference, but both of them were able to prove a tall fescue stand better than a surface application or preparation. We were actually getting those products into contact better with the barricade after actually being able to till it in. And then also rototilling it, which also broke up that barricade layer, was much more effective than actually doing nothing at all. Kind of a picture of our plots. This is what, when we actually had barricade, but did not till it on a bare area. After we seeded, we didn't get really any tall fescue to germinate in that area. We saw a lot more of summer perennials such as bermuda grass and alligator weed growing into it. Whereas when you just tilled it alone, you're able to break up that barrier and you were able to get some tall fescue established in there, but there's still going to be a lot of weed control that was going to be necessary. The Miramichi green and the charcoal, both of these, again, the incorporation of it, we were able to get more tall fescue to germinate in that area, which better tall fescue germination means it was going to be able to grow and be much more competitive against the weeds. Now again, come fall time, with the amount of weeds that we are seeing in these areas, you probably would need to reseed again in the fall, but you would actually have a much better start than you would otherwise.
I should say we waited until we had some rain after the barricade application to move that into the soil, and that why the tilling and actually moving that compost or activated charcoal in contact with the barricade worked a lot better than the surface application, because that barricade has moved down somewhat in the soil, and the surface application of the compost or charcoal is not really getting in contact with the herbicide to be able to bind it up. Of course, one of our major weeds in turf situations is yellow nutsedge. So we have multiple yellow nutsedge trials going on right now. We're evaluating some newer formulations, a product called Broadloom, which is a bentazone formulation, a shutdown, which is a fentrazone formulation. We have that alone and in combination with other post-emergence sedge herbicides, or evaluating Q4 Plus and Surge in a separate trial, and comparing that to Sedgehammer and Solero, as well as Dismiss. So one of the things that we're trying to answer is, what is the length of control? How soon do we start seeing regrowth with these various treatments? And any advantages from looking at combinations of these products for yellow nutsedge control versus applying them separately. We do see differences in speed of action. Obviously, products like Dismiss and bentazone will work quicker. We'll see activity sooner on yellow nutsedge as opposed to the more systemic materials, Sedgehammer and Solero. So what we would like to see is if we could combine the fast action of some of the contact materials with the longer-term control of the systemics, and we get faster as well as longer-term nutsedge control. And then the other sedge that we've been working on that has really gone wild is Kalinga. There's two main perennial species of Kalinga, green and false green Kalinga. Are sedges, and as you've heard me said before, sedges have edges, so Kalinga will have the triangular stem just like yellow nutsedge and purple nutsedge. One difference between yellow nutsedge and Kalinga is we feel yellow nutsedge almost exclusively spreads by rhizomes and tubers. Kalinga, on the other hand, will spread vegetatively by rhizomes, but also spreads readily by seed. I think that's a factor they're taking into account why we may not be seeing long-term control with a lot of our treatments is if there's been seed production, it'll come back seed as well. Now in a mowed turf situation, you could confuse Kalinga with yellow nutsedge. You may not have the seed heads to look at and whatnot. But that's a weed that we're focusing on in terms of what treatments will work well on Kalinga.
Keep going.
And basically, we're looking at the same herbicides that we use for yellow nutsedge control, evaluating them on Kalinga. They also will work on Kalinga. Again, the products that we've tested on yellow nutsedge, Dismiss, Solero, Sedgehammer, Monument, Certainty, Katana, Image, Bazagran, will also suppress Kalinga, just like they also will work on yellow nutsedge. The key, we mentioned with Virginia buttonweed, is we need repeat treatments for control that we not get 100% control with any one herbicide, that we need to come back and make additional applications. And here's some data from a trial that we're doing right now. And again, this is an ongoing trial. Here we grew Kalinga in pots. We took shoot weights 16 days after the initial treatment. We also have the same study going on in standard bermuda grass, so in a field trial. You can see with the shoot weights at 16 days, nothing is completely eliminating Kalinga. We do have quite a bit of weight there left in these pots. We'll be coming back and taking a second round of shoot weights to look at the longer term control with these treatments. Looking 26 days after treatment, the initial treatment in the field trial, and again, we've made a second round of application for these treatments. So we've seen recovery in the broadloom and the shutdown treatments. We have some numbered compounds that we're asked to evaluate in this trial. We tested the combinations of broadloom plus shutdown, giving us a little better control than the broadloom or shutdown by themselves, but still not acceptable. Some combinations with our experimentals. We see a three-way combination that looks interesting, shutdown and an experimental product that we're getting up to almost complete control of Kalinga. Solero is a slow-acting systemic like Sedgehammer, and you can see we're about 60% control going out at 26 days after initial treatment. So at least from this study, it looks like there is some potential with combinations of these products that we might be able to get a little better long-term control of Kalinga. And we'll be following this trial over the next month or so to evaluate regrowth in these various treatments. Another study that's a repeat from last year is a concern that I have involves post-emergence crabgrass control in bermuda grass. And our major herbicide that we've relied on is quinclorac, and that's sold by itself under the trade name Drive. It's in a lot of different combination products that'll say control broadleaf weeds as well as crabgrass. Often have quinclorac as the crabgrass controlling component. So we're using a lot of quinclorac, and the question is, are we going to start seeing resistance in crabgrass to quinclorac? Already has been identified out in California that they found crabgrass that had developed resistance to that herbicide. So if we did start seeing resistance to quinclorac in smooth or large or southern crabgrass, what are our options? Last year, one of our better treatments was Image. A little different timing this year, and we're not seeing quite as good a control with Image this year as we saw last year. We are seeing a better control with Drive this year than what we saw last year. We've looked at Tenacity. Obviously, we would injure Bermuda grass with Tenacity, but it will recover from the bleaching of that material. We've seen good suppression with Tenacity as well as with Tribute Total. But, really, nothing that has really stood out as giving us excellent control of crabgrass, postemergence, and bermuda grass. So I think that's still a need that we have, is for additional products that would take some of the potential resistance pressure off of quinquerate. And it shows you some pictures. The far left picture is an untreated plot, and that's in a stand of bermuda grass, Yukon bermuda grass, but it's really mostly what you're seeing in there is crabgrass. Looking at Tenacity plot, the next one over, we have controlled some of that crabgrass, but we have a growth of crabgrass after that initial application. Next plot is Drive, and that plot happened to have very little bermuda grass, happened to be mostly crabgrass. And you can see the control that we're seeing with Drive, spot, and then far right is Tribute Total. We have significant suppression with one application, but not complete control of crabgrass. We would need to make additional applications to control the surviving crabgrass there.
So this past winter has been one of the winters, I would say, in terms of warm season grass and winter kill injury. How bad was it? You look at our St. Augustine NTEP located here in Virginia Beach. You can see from the summer of 2017, where we had, even though we had kind of a harsh winter prior to that, all of these St. Augustine varieties came through looking very good, and going into the winter were very well established and healthy. Now, if you look at the summer of 2018, you're seeing many of these varieties are no longer there. We actually had on some plots upwards of 100% kill, and I would say on average we saw about 60% kill on most of these new varieties that are coming through. So the best varieties, though, that we saw, you can see here and here, these varieties, these are the Raleigh and the Palmetto. These are the standards that we're trying to get to. Raleigh being the old tolerance standard for St. Augustine. And the reason it is the standard, even in the harsh winter that we had, it was able to survive and be able to make it through, along with Palmetto. Those two are what we're going to have to continue to use in this area until we actually get some better varieties.
I should mention that although the trial kind of looks bad with all the significant injury that we saw, but the reason we got this St. Augustine NTEP trial was to look at cold tolerance. And back in January, I think we got down somewhere around 10 degrees Fahrenheit for a low, and we didn't have snow cover to protect the St. Augustine. So you can see that we had really good separation. A lot of the varieties like Floritam and anything that would be similar genetically just could not tolerate that kind of winter that we'll get occasionally in this area. So a good trial in terms of separating out selections in terms of their cold tolerance. Another major weed for us is Dallas grass, a warm season perennial grass, spreads by seed, spreads by short rhizomes, and really stands out in Bermuda grass is Dallas grass. We looked at programs and treatments over the years, and some programs with multiple applications, in some cases over multiple years, to eliminate Dallas grass from Bermuda grass. We have a new herbicide that we've been evaluating. Trade name is Manuscript. The active ingredient is pinoxidin. This is another herbicide that we call an ACCase inhibitor, similar to products like Sethoxidin, which I mentioned, Segment, Fluazafop, which is Ornamec or Fusilade. So pinoxidin has the same mode of action, so it's a post-emergence grass herbicide, and we're looking at it for selective control of Dallas grass in Bermuda. We've did some early applications. We followed up with some later applications, and basically what we're seeing right now is very good control of Dallas grass. We tested it in a stand of Dallas grass. We also have it in a stand of Bermuda grass, and we're seeing very little to no injury in Bermuda grass. So that's looking very promising. And this is some shots of that work. You can see in the far left picture, that's quite a bit of Dallas grass in that stand of Bermuda grass. This manuscript, and that's a surfactant that we utilize in this trial. We have a little bit of regrowth of Dallas grass. One thing you'll see in this picture, though, there is some of the grass in here is crabgrass, and manuscript is not controlling crabgrass, as well as any broadleaf weed. And we have seen clover and some other weeds, broadleaf weeds coming in. So this is strictly grass control material, and it looks like especially effective on Dallas grass. Another thing that was interesting is we are seeing some tall fescue that happen to be in some of these plots, and it did not seem to be affecting tall fescue. So we come back and evaluate manuscript for its tolerance in tall fescue. We may have some opportunities for Dallas grass control in that species as well. We compared it to tribute total, and you can see very good broadleaf control in this study and control of crabgrass as well. And that's our comparison. Issues that we've had with tribute total is we can get some temporary yellowing in Bermuda grass, so the Bermuda grass will grow, but we'd rather not see that initial injury. And we're comparing it to multiple applications of MSMA, which has been a standard, limited places where you can use MSMA now, but that's been kind of the comparison treatment for years. So very promising what we're seeing with manuscript. We plan to continue working with that material for Dallas grass control. With that, that kind of gives you a summary of a number of the trials that we have going on. We have additional trials we really didn't have time to go over. Talk about our work with foxtail. We do have a family of foxes that live at the station that we see pretty much on a daily basis. So at that point, Mike and Whitley, I want to thank you for your help setting this up. And